What's going on, readers? My name is AG and welcome to my channel. This is going to be my very first book review, and today we're going to talk about Light of the Jedi by Charles Soule. Charles Soule is known in the Star Wars world for writing the 2019 Vader comic series as well as the amazing Rise of Kylo Ren series. This book came out January 5th, 2021 and is the first adult novel in the High Republic series. I did pre-order and read this book the very first week that it came out, but it's been a long time since then, and with the Phase 3 coming out later this year, I wanted to jump back into this era of Star Wars and see how it's grown since then. So just some quick information about this book. It is set 200 years before The Phantom Menace, and this book tells multiple stories that are all connecting about this great Hetzal Prime disaster and the mystery behind it all. It switches back and forth between the High Republic Jedi trying to figure out what happened and how it can be prevented, and the brand new terrifying space group, the Nihil. They're like space Vikings. And it does get way more complex, but I don't want to ruin any of that here. This review will be very spoiler light because this is something I believe that all Star Wars fans should experience for themselves. If you're like me and sometimes you check out book reviews just to see if you should pick it up, I'm telling you now, this is a book that you want to get. I remember when I read it, and even reading it now, I haven't felt this excited about Star Wars since returning from the theater the first night The Force Awakens came out, when everything was so new and so fresh. Obviously, that's kind of gone to the wayside, but yes, it's absolutely worth your time. If that's what you're here for, go check it out, go buy it, go read it. I am going to break this review down into a few parts because there is so much to talk about and it's so easy to lose focus. I want to talk about the characters. I do want to talk about the plot and the pacing, and finally, I want to talk about what worked for me and what really didn't. Now, there is something to be said when I can look at the cover of this book and tell you every single Jedi that's on here. Not only that, but their quirks, the way they view the Force, and all of their believable arcs. Charles Soule has a way of writing these characters that makes them feel so grounded to the Star Wars world, more than anything else that I've ever read in this entire franchise of books. He will absolutely make you love them and cheer them on when things are going their way, and he will make you feel worried and dreadful when things are happening to them, because a lot of things do happen to them throughout this book. All of the Jedi do have their individual stories, and each one of them are engaging. The best, in my opinion, being the new Padawan and Master Bel Zettifar and Loden Greatstorm. This dynamic is so unique. It's just like Anakin and Obi-Wan, but if the roles were reversed, the Master is the one pushing and having fun, and the Padawan is very nervous and is kind of scared of doing new things, and that's just so different and refreshing. I loved seeing it because the Master and the Apprentice trope is overdone, where a Padawan wants to do more things than they're ready, and the Master is kind of unwilling to let them do new things. I also really enjoyed the new cover person, the cover Avar Kriss and her relationship with Elzar Mann. Way more than I thought I would. I remember seeing this when it first came out, seeing this cover and being like, oh, it's just going to be another one of those. But I enjoyed her and Elzar Mann way more than I thought I would. Now, I could sit here and talk about every single one of these Jedis for hours, but what we really need to talk about are these brand new antagonists, the Nihil. Now, they are led by the 3 Tempest Runners, Pan-Eta, Cassiv, and Lorna D, as well as the Eye of the Nihil, my new favorite bad boy, Marchion Ro. The way that these characters' working relationships depend on each other and depend on each other's success, but the way they're always trying to one-up each other and get the better of each other is something really interesting and way more engaging than I really thought it would be. Now, the plot and the pacing of this book took me by surprise. Normally when I read books, I usually get about 2/3 of the way through and I feel some kind of fatigue and I just want to push through to the end, and sometimes it might feel like a chore just to get to the end. This book and the way that Charles Soule writes gave me a reason to slow down and appreciate all of the smaller details in this connecting plot of 3 to 4 subplots. You can tell that he really took the time to map out each of these plots and how their details connect, in a way that when he set things up, you were never left hanging. Everything felt rewarded or earned in some way. Lastly, I want to talk about some things that really worked for me and I enjoyed, and very, very minor things that really took me out of the experience. What really worked for me? First off, the set pieces in this book are unreal and unlike anything I've ever read in Star Wars before. The way that these set pieces are and how grand they are make it really feel like this is a galaxy-wide issue and the Republic is working together to find out what's going on. In other stories, in other similar Star Wars stories, there have been issues where it feels like there's one planet you stay on, or it's one part of the galaxy, but this makes it feel like every planet in the galaxy, whether it's written in the book or not, you can tell it's connected to the story. The way that Charles Soule wrote The Force is something that is absolutely incredible. He makes it so that every Jedi sees it differently, but it in a believable way and something that totally fits into this franchise. For example, our main leading lady, Avar Kriss, she sees the Force as music, and Elzar Mann sees it as a vast ocean that people can pull from. And that's something that I've never thought about before, but totally fits into Star Wars. And lastly, without getting into spoilers, the end of this book is worth the price of admission alone. Just when I thought after a great battle that it was wrapping up and you can feel that it was inching towards the end, there were a group of scenes that felt so calculated, and there was a payoff that I wasn't really thinking about, but it was definitely set up throughout the entire book of things that you had to piece together, that when it got there, it left me on the edge of my seat and it made me immediately want to pick up the next book and start reading it. Now I want to talk about some things that really didn't work for me. There are very, very few things that didn't work for me, and honestly, they're very minor nitpicks because I genuinely believe this is a great book. Number one, there were some scenes with technical stuff going on with a character named Kaventar who's working with the Republic to figure out how the Hetzal disaster happened, and sometimes they just dragged on for me, or they would explain things in a way that just didn't need explaining in my opinion. Like, it just felt too much. Second off, there was a scene at the end of the book that didn't work for me. The new Chancellor Lena So has this phrase that she uses for her vision for the Republic, and it says, and they're 5 words, and they are very powerful: "We are the Republic." But the writing describing her thoughts of these words goes on for 5 to 6 lines that just repeat. These lines are like these 5 words are special. They stand out. These words mean something to everyone. 5 words that lift up others. Words that make my spirit soar when these 5 words are said. It just felt a bit too much for me. The final and biggest problem I have with this book is one scene in the middle of the book with a new character, Pekka Adrian. Her and her husband, Joss, are contractors, and they're hired to help out with the Republic to to help with the Great Disaster and to clean things up in the Great Disaster. One scene where it goes into detail what she's thinking about being on the beach, wearing something very tiny, and her husband's wearing something very tiny, and she talks about them drinking together and then them going back to the room, to making each other feel good, and it just did not feel in place for, number one, what was happening in the scene. But with just Star Wars in general, there's a lot of things that I just don't feel belong in Star Wars, and that's one of them. And for me, when I read it, it took me out of the experience completely, but that's just my opinion. With all those things being said, though, this book is absolutely incredible, and it deserves all the hype that it gets from other YouTubers praising it. I rate things on a page scale of 1 to 5 pages, and this book absolutely deserves a 5 out of 5 pages from me. If you have not read this book and you're a Star Wars fan, or even just a normal sci-fi fan, do yourself a favor, go out and pick up this book and read it, because it is something that's going to be talked about for years to come. If you enjoyed this video, please like it and subscribe to the channel, and comment below what you thought about this book, because I want to hear your thoughts on it. Once again, my name is AJ, and thank you guys for listening. Until next time, stay reading.